Hi guys, and welcome back to our IELTS course. In our today's lesson, we are going to learn about section 3 and 4, and also we'll review different strategies and tips for these two sections. Before we'll begin learning about section 3 and 4, I would like to go back and review with you what we studied previously. As you remember, IELTS listening module has 4 sections and 40 total questions. You'll be given 30 minutes to listen to the recordings, answer the questions, and extra 10 minutes to transfer your answers to your answer sheet. As you remember, we had 4 sections, and section 1 is going to be about a conversation within a social situation. Section 2 is going to be a monologue on the general subject. Our section 3 is going to be a conversation between up to 4 people within educational or training context. And our final section 4 is going to be a monologue as a lecture or academic talk. You'll hear also different task types. You'll be completing them in the IELTS listening test. They are going to be as the following ones: note completion, gap fill, short answer, table completion, the most popular multiple choice questions, sentence completion, and labeling a diagram. So that's what we have for the listening module. And today we'll continue learning about section 3 and 4. Now we are going to review section 3. It is going to be about discussion. The main strategy here to remember is listening for details. Remember, a speaker may correct himself or herself, so you need to pay attention to the possible changes in opinions and facts. To focus on the details, circle the keywords in the question or statement and keywords in the multiple choice options as well. Listen for these words or similar words in the discussion. Sometimes, as you remember, speakers do not say exactly the same words, but they paraphrase their ideas. Listen carefully because a speaker may also alter what he or she says. Here we have an example from authentic IELTS test. For example, speaker might say the following: I left on June 25th. No, it was the 26th. I arrived on the 25th. But returned on the 26th. So see, it can be a little bit confusing, so you need to really pay attention and understand what kind of question you have. When the person arrived or when the person left. So make sure you are listening carefully and taking your notes. And now you can see our example for the discussion type of task. What you have to do here is to circle the keywords, and in my case I highlighted them for you, and listen to the audio and answer the question. So for example, our first question is asking you, what does a student say about the introductory Spanish class? So when you highlight the keywords, so for example, student is a very important word, and introductory Spanish. Also pay attention that it's not only Spanish, but introductory Spanish. Maybe student is going to talk about different types of Spanish classes, such as middle level or intermediate or advanced. So make sure that you are paying attention to modifier you have before the word Spanish. And also, as I mentioned earlier, so you have your multiple choices ABC. So you need to pay attention and highlight or circle the keywords. In this case, he took it already, so took already, too easy, and doesn't have room. So doesn't have room, think about a paraphrase as well. When someone says doesn't have room, it means his schedule doesn't have room. So that means that his schedule is full. So they might say it differently in the listening recording. And the following two questions are similar to our first one. So make sure before you start listening to the recording that you take notes, circle the keywords, and listen carefully. Now we're going to review how to label a diagram. Try to label the diagram without hearing the audio. This will focus your attention on what you need to listen. Also try to pay attention to the directions. And remember not to write more words than required. For example, in the following diagram and task, you are required to write only 2 words. If you write 3 words, your response automatically will be incorrect. So make sure to write 1 or 2 words when you are completing a labeling diagram kind of task, matching words and phrases. When we have this task, we need to read the list to make an assumption about the topic of the discussion. Also, paraphrasing the items in the list is very important too, because it will prepare you for the discussion and what you are going to hear. The most important tip here to remember is that some items in the list may not be mentioned in the discussion, or they may be mentioned in different order. So here we have an example from A through D, and you have a paraphrase on the side. So for example, in our A, it states the following: it requires weekend hours. So you might hear something like work on Saturdays and Sundays. And for example, B, the salary is too low, and instead you might hear something, it doesn't pay much. C, is far from his home, it requires a long drive. And D, it's already been filled, they've already hired someone. So as you see, paraphrase is very important, and they can prepare you for the discussion you are going to hear. Also, make sure that you are preparing yourself and thinking about different ways of saying some things, because in the listening part, it's not going to be exactly like you see in A, B, C, D. Alright guys, so look at the following example we have from the authentic IELTS test. And the IELTS test is asking you, what does Elizabeth do in each one of her classes? Choose your answers from the box. You are given A, B, C, D. For example, A, write papers, B, give a presentation, C, go on the field trips, and D, read a lot. And you also see paraphrase that I have written about these answers. So as I mentioned previously to you, that you're not going to hear sometimes the same exact words like writing papers. It can be stated as researching or writing essays. Giving a presentation can be said as giving a speech. So you also have three following classes: economics, sociology, and geology. If you have a similar task like this one, all you have to do, for example, economics, and you are going to write down which one, A, B, C, D. In economics class, she is writing papers maybe, so you're going to write down A. Sociology class, maybe she's going on the field trip, so for sociology, you're going to write down C. And for example, geology, maybe she's reading a lot, or maybe she's writing papers as well, so it can be an A or D. As you can see, some answers can be repeated. So for example, economics and geology both can be an A. Just pay attention and listen carefully. IELTS Listening Module, Strategies and Tips, Part 2. And now we are going to review our final section of the listening test, which is section 4, about a talk or lecture. In this section, we are going to review how to classify words or statements. When you're completing the task such as this one, you need to read the categories you have, then read the words quickly. Also, it's very important to determine for you a link between a category and a word before you listen. However, you have to keep in mind that you need to write what the speaker says, not what you think. And also remember that you may use the categories more than one time. So now we are going to review our example from the IELTS test, and the task is asking you to do the following. So which features are characteristics of which type of wetland? You need to choose a correct letter. So as you see, we have wetlands and we have ABC, three different names. Don't worry if you have no idea the meaning of the words. It doesn't really matter sometimes. And you have the following: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, acidic water, grasses, shrubs, mosses, and trees. So even though sometimes you do not know some words, please do not worry about that. Sometimes you'll be able to understand even without the knowledge of some words. And a lot of times actually in IELTS, your speaker is going to give you a definition. And actually it happens a lot in the reading part too. So what you have to do in this case, whenever you hear acidic water, and then you might hear word swamp many times, so you're going to write down 1B. And then for example, you might hear something like grasses, and then you'll hear bog, so that's going to be 2C. And sometimes some of them can be repeated. For example, acidic water, grass, or shrubs, they all can be swamp. So that's why you can repeat, you can use, some categories over and over again. So, and this is type of task we have in the section 4. And now we are going to review how to complete notes in the section 4. When you are completing this type of task, you need to circle the keywords in the notes provided. Also, you have to make sure you try to guess the focus of the talk or lecture. And remember, the notes are just notes and they are not necessarily sentences. So the ideas can be incomplete, and that's totally normal. They may not include some prepositions, articles, verbs, or other grammatical clues. It's a very important point to keep in mind. Also remember that the notes follow the order of the talk, and if you miss one gap, you just need to jump to the next one and continue listening and completing the gaps. So here we have an example, and you are being asked to write no more than 3 words for each answer. Before you start listening, make sure you are reading the notes you have and you actually understand what the notes are about. So for example, here we have a topic about color blindness. And as you see, color blindness, and then you have the following words such as the inability to, and you have to fill out the inability to do what. As you see, in this case, we need a verb. The next sentence we have, the most common form is to and gap color blindness. And as you see, it's describing what kind of color blindness. So you have to listen for the adjective that will be describing the most common form of color blindness. And it's very important to pay attention to the following words we have. So for example, here we have causes, and as you see, we have 3 causes. So you have genes and you have exposure to chemicals. So that means you need to listen carefully to the 3rd cause of color blindness. And now we're going to review our final strategies and tips for the listening section 4. And it's actually our final strategies and tips for the entire listening task. So we're going to review how to complete a flowchart. When you have a task like this one, you have to circle the keywords in the chart and ask yourself what the chart is about and try to complete the chart without listening. Doing so will help you be a careful and a better listener. So make sure you examine your chart and then you circle the keywords and try to understand what kind of information you need to fill it out with. Also for the tips, notice the grammar of the words in the chart. The words you write in the gap should match the grammar of the words. So it means if you have a statement and then you have to fill out the statement with some words, then it means it has to be grammatically correct. Let's take a look at the following example we have, and here you are being asked to write no more than 3 words. So our topic is indirect solar water heater, and you have 3 different statements. Make sure you read them carefully and circle the keywords. So for example, for number 1, we have the antifreeze solution is 1 gap in the solar collector. So the most important words here are antifreeze solution and solar collector. So make sure you are listening for the words like antifreeze solution, and solution can be maybe said differently using different synonyms, but you have to be very careful when you're listening. Maybe you're going to hear a couple of things, so write them down and then go back and try to fill your gaps with the words you caught while listening and see which one grammatically fits in this context. And that's how you're going to complete this type of task. And don't forget, this is one of the most challenging part in the IELTS exam. It's a listening section 4. So always do your best, and if you skip some of the statements and you didn't get information, that's totally fine. Just make sure you don't give up and continue listening carefully. And now we are going to review our final recap for the listening task. As you remember, you'll be given 40 minutes to complete listening task, 30 minutes listening to the recordings, and 10 minutes transferring your answers to your answer sheets. You'll have 40 questions in total, and your section 4 is going to be about a lecture, which is going to last between 3 to 5 minutes, and section 3 is going to be about a conversation between up to 4 people with an educational training context. And remember, you'll hear everything only one time. So you have to be very careful and make sure you take notes and listen carefully and prepare yourself and predict information. Also remember that the notes follows the order of the talk. That means if you miss one gap, you need to move on to the next one. And this is very important that you are listening carefully, and even though you miss some gaps, it's totally fine. Just make sure you are trying to focus again and listen carefully. A lot of times students give up after they miss a couple of gaps, but it doesn't mean you are going to score badly. So make sure you are continuing listening and you are trying to refocus your attention.